Welcome back to Design Build Workshop. Just a really quick update on the HL printed factory, and wanted to go over a piece that was fairly complicated. So here we go. So just a quick little update on the factory build. I reprinted that front facade piece, and now you can see I changed the font and I changed the size of the anvil a little bit. So you can see that came out a little bit better. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for what I'm trying to accomplish. And I also printed this in one piece. So this was a separate piece right here, and then this was separate, but now I've put them together and printed it as one. So that worked out pretty well. And then the copper tops of those four tower pieces, I was able to figure out a way to get the rivets in there. Not exactly perfect, but good enough for what I'm looking for. So once it's all painted, it should look pretty good. And then I glued together some of those four corner pieces. I don't want to put any more together because I need to paint the interior of this black as a primer before I go any further, but they're cleaned up as far as like removing any kind of like little strings or anything like that. And remember, I printed these in half, so if you can see there's a seam here, but this is sanded, so hopefully you can still see what's going on there. But so these are the two halves glued together, and that makes my girder. And then obviously this is the floor. I'm not too concerned about how the floor looks because that's going to be painted and it's glued up, so it's just the base. And then this is the painted version. So I used Vallejo magnesium for the paint on here, and this is going to be the base, and then we'll probably wash it with black and then highlight it with some rust to give it some weathering. And then this was definitely the most challenging piece. I have an inset of how I was grinding some of this part off. So to print this, I originally started just flat like this with no supports. I was hoping that the arch would keep this being able to print, but because these pieces are so thin, when the printer was going back and over, these were moving too much. So what I did, instead of adding support, because I knew if I added support it would be way too much to remove, what I actually did is I took a single thin 0.02 of an inch underneath each one of these. So there's a really super thin wall that was actually printed underneath every one. So when this did print, it was kind of totally supported. Well, almost totally. You can see from the cleanup that this was pretty rough, and that's because there was some overhang, but it printed out well enough. And the underside doesn't really matter that much as long as it is, smooth. As long as I have a straight curve in here, a nice, even curve, because that's just going to go on top of these, like so, right? And that's going to be, and what's going to be sandwiched between here and here is that clear membrane that I had from that cover. So hopefully that'll work out. But there we are so far. So this is what I was talking about with those support pieces. And if you look here, you can see that it's not continuously up against the finished piece. There's little gaps. And that was just so I could remove it a lot easier. And it was enough to give it support, so when it was printing, it wasn't going to cause these thin pieces to, flop around as the printer was moving on it. So this was enough to support the whole thing. And if you look on the side here, you can see I've got this supported, and the front is kind of the same way right there. And if you look from underneath, you can see these are really thin. And so what it did when it was done, it was I could almost just break these off. And then there was just a little trimming that had to happen to get all that removed. And then if you roll this back, as far as if I take the support out of it, it ends up looking like that. And that's what we ended up with. So it took a little thought, but it worked out pretty well. I'm happy with how it turned out, and we'll move on. Thanks again for joining me on this short update of the HL Scale factory build, and hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.